Hello, I'm Berthe Fortin. I'm a costume practitioner and I'm doing a PhD at London College of Fashion. With my research, I examine the creative agency of costume from a phenomenological approach. Before I introduce the aspect of my research I'm about to discuss, I would like to thank the critical costume organizers for inviting me to present my approach of costume agency. My presentation is on the criticality of open-ended laboratoire processes I've created to underpin a different approach to costume. This approach centers on the body responding to material movement that may inform new approaches to performance making. The body at the center of this research is my body. To explain this, I'm going to talk a little about my background as costume designer and how I came about to develop a phenomenological approach. Then I'm going to introduce phenomenology by discussing the theory of Maurice Merleau-Ponty, specifically on the body in the world, flesh and reversibility. Following this, I'm going to discuss how I utilize this theory for my practice. Then I will talk about how it is significant and meaningful to the development of my costume practice. Questioning why costume might be understood as a creative agent comes from my practice as costume designer. My experience is in traditional theatre and expanded approaches of performance making. From my practice, it is evident that costume procedures are embedded in hierarchies of practice. This both for traditional and for devised theatre and performance. This status quo has brought me to question my creative role. This is at the source of my exploration of costume making movements, a body of knowledge not explored. This has led me to question if the costume maker's body can be taken somewhere else than the space of performance making and become involved in the creative process in a different way. My proposition is to approach costume as a movement practice. Interrogating the position of the body in the costume creative process as a movement practice comes from my experience of costume as a physical experience. For this reason, I'm placing my body at the center of this research. To explain this, I'm using Maurice Merleau-Ponty's theory of body in the world to place myself, my body, as part of the experience of costume. The body in the world corresponds to the idea that all parts of the world already exist before consciousness or prior to reflection. And the body experiences all that there is in the world. And this includes other bodies, other people, things, materiality. The body is sensing the world. And by sensing, the body is experiencing. In this sense, the body is actively perceiving. It is a movement. I utilize this definition of body as movement to situate myself in relationship with the environment from which I create costume. In this way, costume is an encounter of materiality through senses, instead of a pre-established definition or a costume created for a purpose. And I explain this with the theory of flesh. Flesh is the structure of relationships common to all that there is in the world. It is what connects me to other people, things, materiality, and other people, things, materiality to me. It is a structure, a fabric of connections, all part of my experience of the world as I'm part of theirs. In relation to the concept of flesh, the body is, according to Merleau-Ponty, the sole means I have to go into the heart of things by making myself world and making them flesh. Making myself a world means opening myself as a sensory body to how materials transform, and by this enable the description of what they reveal when encountering movement. For instance, a chosen material encountering a particular action may curve or bounce. This relationship will engender another movement. By this, a reconfiguration of body and materials will take place. Another aspect of the theory of flesh I'm using to question the relationship between body and material is reversibility. Merleau-Ponty explains this as a dual relationship of sensing while being sensed and touching while being touched. What interests me in this is the tangibility of reversibility, is touching while being touched. I use this in my practice to describe what I'm sensing when entering in contact with materials of costume, and how sensing materials as they change is a physical engagement by which I explore how they can change what I do. I undertook to devise a method of making for the purpose of describing relationships. Part of this development is the creation of a workshop context. For the purpose of the method, I substitute performance wearables for costume. This is because while this research originates from a definition of costume from conventional and devised theatre and performance, realizing a costume as a complete object is not the purpose of this research. The making actions facilitate an open-ended process. The goal with this is to experience the relationship between movements of making and materials of performance wearables, and by this develop an in-depth description of these relationships. The development of the method of making began in the individual setting of my studio. It involved experimentations with materials, methods of making, and rehearsals. I developed laboratoire processes to provide me with a workshop context where to engage with participants in movements and making actions. This is an extract of an individual rehearsal. I applied phenomenology by describing the duality of what I experienced. In these reflections, I'm describing the reversibility at the center of my engagement with materials as they affect my actions. This is the basis of the practice of describing relationships. This rehearsal was in preparation for the running of a laboratoire. Through the iterative development of individual and laboratoire processes, I have devised a practice of describing the relationship between participants, materials, and my own actions. In this extract of laboratoire, I'm making performance wearables with a movement practitioner. Sensing another body, a different movement, engaged with my actions of making, led me to make discoveries about my own costume experience. It brought me to move in ways I could not anticipate. I experienced different sensations from the materials. This changed the way I interacted with them. My experience of this open-ended practice of costume making in relationship with one of the participants has demonstrated to me a way to intensify the physical engagement with materials. This in turn has provoked unthinking, spontaneous movement where my body is more receptive to what the materials do. It has also shed light on the approach of the designer's body as a tool of research, and on the transformative role of materiality in the development of costume as creative method. Thank you.